Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Cabral. I'm the founder of Purpose and Perspective, a creative and brand strategy consultancy specializing in sustainable and purposeful engagement, and a founding fashion partner at SustainChain. It's really wonderful to be with you today at FIT's 15th Annual Sustainable Business and Design Conference. We're quite honored to be part of this amazing program. FIT is such an important and critical institution that really lays out the fashion industry's foundation for tomorrow's innovators, brands, and visionaries. So it's incredible to think that this is the 15th annual Sustainability Summit. And as many of us know, we're living in what has been marked as the decade of action by the United Nations. And as we quickly reach 2030, it's undeniably the most critical time for us to be focused on the sustainability and regenerative goals and challenges that need to not only be set, but met by both the private sector and civil society. Now, the how-to part of this sustainability journey is oftentimes the most challenging. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to this amazing group of subject experts and just fascinating humans. And we're going to dive into an engaged and really solutions-driven conversation about how technology specifically as a solution can really accelerate and scale the much needed progress that we need in the sustainability ecosystem today. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Julia Perry, my co-moderator and co-founding fashion partner at SustainChain. We have Jacqueline Corbelli, a leader in change management and the founder of the US Coalition on Sustainability and SustainChain, and Louis Perkins, the president of the Apparel Impact Institute. Julia, Jackie, and Louis, in that order, if you could briefly give us a little bit more insight into your experience and the important roles that you play within the sustainability ecosystem, and then we'll dive into our Q&A. Jules, if you want to go.
Thanks, Liz. That was a lovely introduction, and it's always so great for me to be on a panel with Louis and Jackie and yourself. And as you mentioned, FIT is an organization and an institution that is just fundamental when it comes to anything to do with fashion and innovation. So we're really happy to be part of this programming. My name is Julia Perry, as I mentioned, and I am the founder of two companies, 5.0 Brand and Image and Accidental Stylist. I have an office here in New York and one in France. And hopefully I'll be heading back to France in May after all the restrictions are over. My specialty is in fashion, PR and marketing for fashion brands and also individuals, sort of building their, and leveraging opportunities for them and creating awareness and business. But one of the things that I've been doing in the last 15 months that I'm extremely proud of, which brought me, of course, to meeting great people like Louis, who's on the panel, is along with Liz, I am a founding partner of the US Coalition on Sustainability, particularly in the fashion sector, where in the last 15 months, we've been building this amazing community and working with people that have joined us, very much like AII, Patagonia, Textile Exchange, Allbirds, and so on. So it's really said so much about what Jacqueline has built for us to be part of. And with that, I'm going to let Jackie talk a little further.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Julia. And hello, Louis. It's always a pleasure to be speaking with you. Jules and Liz, I can't thank enough for the amount of thoughtful and deep thinking that they've brought to sustainability from the fashion sector standpoint, but overall. And I say that because I'm Jacqueline Corbelli. I'm the founder of the US Coalition on Sustainability. And as Julia and Liz both mentioned, we have been on a journey together for the last 15 months or so. To bring a integrated, unified, sort of action-oriented approach to the sustainability mission, if you will, all of which lies in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, which were the UN's way of saying, let's travel this final mile and let's not leave anyone behind, and let's address all there is with respect to humanity. from everything from poverty and inequality to climate change. And so it was my assignment to do what I could to apply my own background in change management and bring it to bear at this very important time in what is known as the Decade of Action. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you all.
Louis, the spotlight's on you.
All right, great. Well, I just want to join in thanking FIT and really commending you all for keeping sustainability at the forefront of your work for the last 15, but I know more than that, years, and all the ways that you have. And I've had the privilege of speaking at FIT in the past when I was at Cradle to Cradle Institute, and look forward to being back again soon when we all resume to having these types of gatherings in person. And I also want to thank the SustainChain team and everyone on this panel with me for bringing me into this work, because it's such an honor to be able to connect with individuals around the work that we're all doing, and to really bring the what sometimes seems like siloed pieces of action into more collective engagement and really drive towards change. And I think that's exactly what we're here doing today, and represented by the discussion we'll have around technology and platforms, which is what we've learned in this year around the ability to accelerate by leveraging relationships through platforms such as SustainChain and all the others like this one we're using right now on Zoom. So my background is, as I mentioned, I do come from the sustainability space, mainly focusing on product design and product sustainability. So I've started my sustainability career in the built environment, working for one of the large carpet and tiling manufacturing companies, Mohawk Industries, really looking at the early seed of sustainability and circular economy as it related to a lot of the material inputs of flooring. And from that really gained a keen interest and passion around circularity, cradle to cradle principles, and really leaning in towards the theme of regenerative systems. So that circularity is materials, but it's water, it's energy, it's human capital, and that this idea of giving back and creating greater abundant flow throughout the systems is really very deeply aligned towards the Sustainable Development Goals and the work that I've been passionate about. And now I get to lead the Apparel Impact Institute, and we're really focused on scaling impact in the supply chain of the apparel sector. We were founded about 3 years ago, rolling out of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition with support from IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative out of the Netherlands, who does global work on supply chains. And there's much more to talk about with this. So that's my introduction. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, everyone did such a great job of setting up, what we're going to be discussing in all of these really critical conversations. So we'll get right into it. Jackie, I'm going to start with you. So as most of us have mentioned, we are living in the Decade of Action, as noted by the United Nations. And your close ally and mentor, Amina Mohammed, who is the UN Deputy Secretary General, is the architect of the SDGs. And I think for those of us in the know, we know what the SDGs are, but there are a lot of people out there who perhaps aren't as familiar with it. Some companies subscribe to it and really sort of, create their sustainable goals based off of that architecture, and some don't. So I wanted us to just sort of touch on it briefly, just so that everybody can put it within that context. So these 17 sustainable development goals essentially act as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all, as you mentioned, Jackie. In the context of SustainChain as a technology and the SDGs really act as a North Star. And really that's what the mission is driven by in this platform. So technology is the driver to achieve this success in the framework of these goals. And so since we're speaking in the context of fashion, how do the SDGs apply to this specific industry? It might be a relatively new sort of, roadmap for people. And so we just wanted you to expand on why fashion within the context of a technology platform has really sort of as an industry proven itself to be a leading demonstration of what change can look like, what progress needs to look like, and essentially what redesigning the supply chain has to look like, and how technology can really sort of enable that.
Yeah.
All working within the context of this blueprint, these goals.
I love this question. And thank you, Liz. I'll do my best to answer it. I have to start with a little earlier than that. I think the SDGs themselves, it can't be understated how remarkable of a development the SDGs are for us, for the globe. We talk about them now in terms of how much sense they make and how they can act as a North Star and how they bring sort of structure to our thinking. And that is certainly proven out in terms of how much enthusiasm and I would say growing energy and effort around sustainability across industries, across supply chains, across different sort of sectors, if you will, including not-for-profits and governments and so on. And I just want to pause on that for just a second before we get into fashion, because I think sometimes, you know, they've been around for about 5 years now. And I think it's really important for us to sort of take a moment and realize what a step, what a grand step we've taken as a globe, as a people, in terms of pursuing this sort of standard set of principles. It was no easy task for Amina. I call her my Nigerian sister, to architect the goals. As you can imagine, the UN is a tough place to create groundbreaking platforms for change, but she did it, and she got the full embrace of the globe, full consensus as is required at the UN, and I could not be more honored to be a part of it. Secondly, when I was drawn into this equation, I was drawn in to apply change management expertise. It was less about industry subject matter expertise. I find that change management is independent and has to be independent from any specific industry or aspect of the change that you're trying to carry through and pull off. So everything that I did when I was first brought into this sort of effort and got the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability underway was from a perspective of bringing all sectors together, bringing all industries together, addressing all supply chains, because that's what the SDGs require. And so when I think about fashion and your question with respect to the strides that it's making, I could not be more struck by the energy and the intensity that I'm experiencing inside the fashion industry. I come from tech, I come from media, I come from banking and marketing, and all of those industries are actually pretty good at talking about what it is they're doing to help contribute to the SDGs. And some do better than others. The remarkable thing about fashion, and particularly in the context of the pandemic period, is that they really have been walking in relative lockstep compared to other industries. And it's something I think the fashion industry should feel really proud about. Obviously, it's a starting point. And it's with people like Lewis's incredible work with AII, and of course, the two of you, I can't say that enough, that the efforts underway are not just sort of reinforced by the pandemic and sort of brought to a different level because of the efforts taking place, but it's being done in a very, very sort of thoughtful way that recognizes the need to, as Lewis said, let's move away from the silo-based activity. Let's stop working in petri dishes. Let's come together. Let's recognize the sort of shortage in resource, the shortage in funding, the shortage of time, right? In terms of reinventing the wheel, inadvertently, of course, reinventing the wheel, duplicating efforts and so on. These are the things that are so remarkable to me about the fashion industry right now. And I say that just based on what our experience together has allowed us to observe over the last 15 months.
I'm just going to quickly jump in because, Liz and I come from a very strong fashion background, and we've, over the years, we've been running into each other at the, shows in Paris during Paris Fashion Week or here in New York. And we've always been saying how, why is it not changing? Why is this model not changing? Everyone knows that it's broken. Too much consumption, too much overproduction, too much harm to the environment, too much, for the hurt down the supply chain with the workers. And though we don't want to look in the rearview mirror any longer, we want to be optimistic. But we do see that there's definitely a shift in the way this industry is thinking, that it's almost like the aha moment with COVID, when nobody was dressing and the whole industry came to this standstill, right, Lewis? And you feel like, okay, here's our chance. This is really our chance. And it's been amazing that we've been able to sort of, work on this platform, and at the same time have all these people come to us and saying, you're right, we need your help, we need to do it, we want to do it better. And as you said, Jax, it all has to do with the SDGs, gender equality and, caring for the planet and resources. And I mean, it just goes on, so many things that you don't even think that fashion touches that are so important. So.
That's very true, Julia. Thank you for sort of, summarizing that in that way. So Lewis, I want to direct this to you now. Because we've now established sort of, what the SDGs are and how that relates in the context of fashion, but also cross industry, cross sector, et cetera. And AII and you personally have been on the ground doing the good but very hard work for a long time now. AII specifically nearly 15 years. So you, of all people, have a very comprehensive perspective of where we've been, where we really need to go in the way of change and sustainability specifically. And I want to bring the conversation back to technology, because we're here to talk about technology and how that's affecting and impacting change. So how has technology specifically impacted and helped accelerate the work that you're doing? How does it directly apply to that?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, because I think that, turn the dial back 13 months ago when we were just beginning to get some insight into the global impact of this. We had actually had a couple of months, because of the team that we have in Beijing and the mill improvement programs that we were running in China. We had some insights into what was already happening that we were paying closer attention to than I think we would have been had we not been operating in China. And so for that reason, it gave us a little bit of an advanced view of what could be coming. But pretty quickly, other regions that we operate and build programs in were shut down in terms of operations. So the way AII works is that we sit in the center of impact projects and impact programs, usually that are proven solutions that have been developed and we know can actually yield lower carbon emissions or reduced water usage or chemical management strategies, and that we just need to scale these programs. But obviously, if the world is shut down and if manufacturing is shut down, then you aren't going to be running these programs. And so right off the front of this pandemic, and as it hit the U.S., we were facing that all of our programs were closing down for the year. And the way we also work is that we recruit brands and manufacturers together to be in community. And so a lot of the brand retailers have offices either in Hong Kong or Shanghai or other parts of Asia where they can quickly get to their supply chain, and they run a lot of their supply chain and sourcing relationships out of Asia. And so typically we have in-person events where we educate manufacturers and their technical resources, the engineers on their team or those who are running the machines or the managers of the shifts, to be able to actually learn about our programs. And so all of that had to shut down as well too. And so we had to look at, how do you continue to build and run your programs and or accelerate your business and drive towards the SDGs? Are we going to lose a whole year? Or is everything stuck? And we know we have a very ambitious goal as an industry in the apparel sector of reducing our carbon emissions by the year 2030 by 45%. That's the industry target, and that's aligned towards the Paris Agreement and science-based targets in order to keep under 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature increase, so that we don't go over the point of no return. And so in order to kind of meet that audacious and big goal, we can't slow down, right? So part of what we leveraged was technology and technical tools in order to keep our programs running as best that they could. And there were countries where we were still running manufacturing programs, and there were areas that we were slowing down, but we were building up capacity. So the ability to actually engage with individuals through, rather than in person, but really leveraging whether it was Zoom or whether it was other technical platforms that we could build, was when we met SustainChain in this year, and we started to build out our program profiles on that platform in order to attract more individuals to what we're doing, to kind of move it out from just phone calls and conversations or the water cooler at some great sustainability conference with a bunch of brand retailers, to actually getting this information out there in a more public way and inviting people to be part of that. So I think, like many of us, the tech existed or was in development, or the concept, but the ability to double down on resources to accelerate this utilization of technology, or develop or refine certain platforms in a way that could better be used, was what we were part of. We were right there in the middle of it.
Excellent. And I guess I also wanted to touch on the idea of, with technology comes a lot of opportunity in the way of connectivity and sort of shortcutting the sort of the process and the timeline of things. I think back to one of our initial and really supportive partners, like Gabriella Hurst. She likes to say, what took me 5 years in sort of that analog manual way, with SustainChain takes 5 minutes. And so that's obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but we'll take it. So, in a day and age where brands, individuals, organizations have the opportunity to really create and carve out businesses for themselves through technology like Shopify, people can become businesses and brands operationally quite easily in this way. Do you feel like the timeline, like there's just not an excuse anymore, as to why they can't find the resources? Is this just an opportunity to really shortcut that timeline and to create a whole other level of transparency that we haven't yet seen? Yeah. If you want to touch on that first, Louis, and then Jackie, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to touch on that briefly, because I think that's exactly what we're witnessing. And one major way in which this industry is going to lean into shortcutting is the verification of data along the supply chain and the value chain, and looking at not only the impact of production on site through either cloud-based metering systems or other more real-time ways to capture the data, rather than sending in this auditor process that's very labor and time consuming. How can we leverage tech platforms and technology? And there's been a lot of great conversations in the industry, a lot of them centered around our partner, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and leveraging of their HIG tools. Ultimately, what are we working towards when we talk about transparency and the ability to, again, shortcut how cumbersome it is to gather and verify data, and that we can start moving more rapidly towards accelerating that, without sending so many people in real time into facilities, which oftentimes, now we're recognizing there's a risk to that, and that we're going to want to minimize sometimes the labor, the cost, the exposure that we have by sending people all over the place. So I think that's a big part of where we see technology also really playing a key role, is that transparency of information and that verification of the data.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in there if that's okay, Liz.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. I think that what Louis said is sort of hits on some of the way that I think about this as well. And so sort of when you really step back, it's sort of technology has not just an important role to play, but sort of a multifaceted role to play. And been in a lot of conversations recently where, and to Louis's point, so much exists. If we could only sort of have the transparency and means by which to connect and understand what does exist, what doesn't exist, where the gaps are, how we can come together to solve the gaps, and so on. And sort of that's the sort of, I feel it is sort of a unique thing that SustainChain is able to provide. And it fits so hand in glove, I feel, with what Louis is describing. I often say Louis and Air, our muse over at SustainChain. And it's true because he can articulate so beautifully and precisely what is needed. And it's not just an intellectual sort of assessment, right? It's a real experience-based observation, and then the ability to sort of, from a practical standpoint, apply. So many folks see what SustainChain is and they're extremely excited about it because it does bring that transparency, and it brings connection, and it brings that ability to understand that others may be sharing the challenge that you set your sights on or you are prioritizing. There are innovations out there that help address the challenge that you're trying to focus on that you didn't know about. And so it has that sort of value add, not from the standpoint of the necessarily of addressing the actual problem itself, but the way, right? The navigation to the North Star, right? Which I think Louis is just, again, just so beautifully expresses in terms of how important that is. Navigating our way to this place, right, will take that type of transparency, will take that sort of alignment, connection, unification, and things like that. And auditing and that type of validation, bringing, assuring the veracity and efficacy is obviously something that technology is probably, obviously we can't get there without technology at this point, just from the sheer complexity of where we are and where we're headed.
I was hoping, if you don't mind, Louis, I wanted to, because we have such a great audience here with the students of FIT and alumni and so on, that we're working on a special project within SustainChain, and you're our partner. If there's any little bit that you could share with the audience, give them a little look behind the curtain. I just think this is a beautiful way to sort of explain and illustrate what happens when like people come together, they want to get stuff done, and this is how we do it. So I'd love to have you share that.
Absolutely. So, in I don't even want to say in normal times, and in other times, we relied heavily on conferences and networking groups and associations in real time, in person, to be able to build the relationships that we needed. And that is where we would find funders. That is where we would find investors. That's where we would find strategic partners. And that's great, but it relies on a heavy cost of human capital and resources, as well as financial capital and resources, and planetary, when you start to look at the impact of all of us who fly around the world to be part of these very strategic and important conversations. And I'm not saying that's going to go away, nor should it. There is magic that happens when we get in the room. And I can't wait to be in person with the ladies on this panel with me, because if we have magic through our collaborative project through Zoom, I can only imagine how great we're going to be able to collaborate in person and really drive change. So, not to say anything against being in person, but I will say the work that we're able to do with SustainChain by putting our programs up publicly for like-minded individuals who are focused on achieving UN Sustainable Development Goals across given timelines is increasingly powerful, in the same way that we've all been leveraging tools like LinkedIn or Crunchbase, or things that are sharing information around how to connect on who's doing what and who's part of what community and who's interested or focused on what. These communities of practice that are digital are ways in which without it, we can't expand what we're trying to do as rapidly. And so the behind the curtain for us is that we put of our programs up on the SustainChain platform, where you profiles on what we're doing, whether it's related to chemical management and water stewardship in Los Angeles, or climate efforts and climate action in Italy with luxury brands, or material efficiency and resource efficiency programs in China, Vietnam. All these programs require on-the-ground partners. We always like to partner with local NGOs and nonprofits who are also working on the SDGs. We always like to find on-the-ground local technical engineers that we can recruit and build capacity to do the work on the ground. We don't fly in people from other parts of the world or from the West. So therefore, being able to better network and attract these people to our programs is critical. I will also say the thing by putting all our profiles up on SustainChain and inviting our partners, starting with our luxury brands in Italy, then expanding that into our partners that are centered around each country or region, because we have a different set of stakeholders in each region. By being able to put those profiles up and inviting our communities to participate, it's almost this rippling effect, because then they can invite their communities to participate and their communities to participate, and people can find the work. So the other thing that I'll say that's critical about this, and why I'm excited about doing this work with SustainChain, is two efforts. One, we want to draw resources to us, but almost more important to that, we want to defragment the multitude of initiatives that are happening out there in silos. Bingo. Because let me tell you, right now, brilliant conversations are happening with people about the very thing I need to solve for, or the very partners I need to find. I guarantee you they're having the right conversation, and they should be at our table and we should be at theirs. And even when we were flying around the world attending conferences, there was no way to necessarily find all these people. You could pass them at the water cooler and not even know that they're working on the same thing you are. So I'll just summarize by saying, our ability to partner with SustainChain and start piloting out these collective communities of action and draw ourselves to each other. So it's not just bringing, as I said, resources to AII, it's bringing our resources to each other so that we can really start clustering the work. Because, we use this phrase collective action and we throw it around, but it is kind of, when we say this is the decade of action, this is also the decade of collective action and accelerating by coming together more closely, reducing the amount of inefficiencies by duplicating efforts, defragmenting all the various work streams. It doesn't mean we're trying to make anyone go away. It means we're trying to actually improve and strengthen us all by coming together.
Well, you could not have set up my next question more beautifully. In fact, you probably answered it.
I was going to say, oops, did I go off script and answer the next question?
Not at all. There's no script. We're in conversation. So this is brilliant. But we did want to talk about this idea of collective action, connectivity, connective action, and circling back specifically to the fashion industry, because as we all know, having been around for more than a minute, this industry really functions traditionally in a very sort of guarded, and as you said, siloed way, right? There's a lot of really sort of cards close to the chest, and people don't want to reveal too much, and exclusivity and competitiveness, etc. So, but we all know, obviously, we've said this on this discussion, and I think collectively realize that it's only through collaboration and collective action are we going to make any type of progress, right, towards sustainability. We run out of time. 2030 is sort of like an eyes blink away. And so how, this idea of community you'd mentioned, right? It's I know, Jackie, it's really integral in the ethos of what you're doing through SustainChain. It's the community, building the community, and we'll only get there together. So is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on that in the way of how do we sort of unlock that, that the way that this industry's worked in that sense, and how do we make not only, individuals and brands and organizations realize that, true collaborative efforts are required. No one organization will do it alone. Everyone says they want to do it, right? I think these are catchphrases that are out there right now in the way that just as sustainability has been heavily marketed and attractive, so is collaboration and collective action. But, Jackie, I wanted to ask if you can, how valuable is that sort of dynamic?
Yeah.
And that change. And then Louis, to you after the point, I'd love for you to show like a real time, as you said, way of how this collaborative action is working.
Mhm.
I will start on this whole topic of community, saying that I feel that there is a synchronicity that is palpable, um, especially in the fashion industry, but it does go beyond the fashion industry, but especially in the fashion industry. I believe that there is true desire to do all of the things and for the reasons that Lewis has articulated. I see it, you feel it. Just the growth in the number of organizations that are on SustainChain in just the past couple of months, how much that's grown, I think is a testament to the desire and the synchronicity in terms of we all know we need greater community and we know we need to come together in a different way. How they get there may vary, but we all share in a moment. Or at least a very, very, very substantial population does, that this form of community is so important. I'll also say, and I'm not sure whether you're going to have to edit this out, but I will tell you that if I don't know if any of you have been involved in Clubhouse, for example, but the number of conversations on Clubhouse from the various facets of all of the issues that surround sustainable supply chains and the SDGs and so on, it's stunning, actually. And there is a pattern to it. And it's all part and parcel of this sort of palpable nature of, look, we all have our own expertise to bring to this. We all have our own perspectives to bring to this, but it doesn't matter unless. So how do we bring all those things together? That is a community, right? A community that recognizes together their challenges, recognizes together their differences, but is searching for the sameness, right? And bringing people together across the ecosystem. And I say it because, as a former consultant, and as someone who has been a technology entrepreneur and has raised money in the private sector and so on, this is not an ordinary thing, right? Also, the competitive nature of fashion, I'm learning, is different. I'm learning through all of you. It's not unique, right? There is that a competition that is, it can be very deep and very ugly, frankly, across all industries. And what I'm finding, one of the observations I have about the type of community that comes together in fashion, and why I feel so good about what's happening there, is that is sort of comes down to something very simple. We will not get there unless it's not just about big companies with, very strong sort of corporate communications areas who can be really articulate about what they're doing. Certainly we need that. And hopefully they're really behind their words. But it's really the small and medium-sized enterprises who are going to get us there. And one of the things that I've observed in this industry is just how many small and medium-sized enterprises there are, and how important they will be to driving the outcome. How do we get to scale with these sustainability innovations, right? There is so much impact investment, as Lewis well knows, ready, right? They're ready to invest in the right opportunities. And there are obviously, certain basic questions that have to be answered with respect to scalability. Can you validate the demand, the level of demand, and so on? And so going all the way back to the beginning of your question here, and I'll speak to SustainChain in terms of the way that it's been designed. It's designed to specifically bring in all of those folks who seem to be at this sort of in this moment together, and recognizing the importance of community, and having that singular conversation that says, if we answer for these particular challenges, pick one, right? We will all get there together. And it's really a beautiful thing to watch unfold.
Lewis, did you want to add to that? I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
Well, I think you had also sort of asked me a little bit specifically around, even more on how we envision this tool being more leveraged as well. And I think everything that Jacqueline said is on point. And one of the things that I've seen shift, and I've been working, in sustainability space for 15 years now, and the shift is the willingness to actually be in collective action in a way that before it seemed like we were in competition. And certainly one can understand that happens on the industry side, that brand retailers have oftentimes wanted to lead with sustainability. They've oftentimes wanted to be sort of at the forefront of it, and sometimes making sustainability in their initiatives or their sourcing of certain types of materials or their programs to be competitive. And that has been sort of dissipating over the years. And so the ability to even get brands to agree to be on SustainChain with us in a way that they could collaborate and share ideas and resources and be willing to have conversations emerge together as a group, I think is a newer thing. Because some of that may have happened again at some of these industry water coolers, but we've always been very careful about inurement or price fixing or anything that looks like any antitrust. And I think that's critical that this industry pays attention to that. But it has sometimes kept us from even being willing to have some of the key important discussions of when something is absolutely not competitive and it needs to be a pre-competitive approach. And I think what SustainChain is really helping us do is kind of invite more of that pre-competitive space conversation from the corporate side. But then when you translate that in even to the nonprofits and NGOs and folks that are out there developing programs, there's, I think, a little bit of I'll say, maybe this is a word to be careful to use, but maybe an exhaustion with being in silos. I think we're all, because at the heart of it, those of us, whether we're at the UN or whether we're inside different nonprofit environmental organizations or we're working funded by the fashion industry to work on specific issues, we're tired of pushing the rock up the hill. Right. It's hard work, and going at it alone is not anywhere. So when we say this is the decade of action, it's the decade of collective action. And I think that's what I'm seeing a real shift in. Before, I think it was talk. We were willing to walk the talk and say, no, we work with everyone. We want everyone to succeed. But now I think it's almost out of self and individual preservation and or advancement to say, that cliche of we're better together as two, or, if you're better, I'm better. And 100%, that's where everybody is looking right now. There's no way this is going to be done without coming together. And so that's the major shift that I've seen, is this increased willingness for pre-competitive collaboration and leveraging tools and platforms to have those public discussions.
Right. And beyond the discussions, it's also a very practical use, right? Yeah. For these, as you said, Jackie, these small, medium-sized brands and organizations out there that don't have the resources, the bandwidth, or the time to collect all those learnings and findings and resources. And so, why create all of this duplicative work? We're all, at the end of the day, as you said, working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
That's a great example. And I'll say one thing about that, and a call out for getting more and more brands up on SustainChain, is that there's a lot of small, medium enterprise manufacturers and brands who feel like, I can't do this, I'm not big enough, my suppliers aren't going to listen to me when I ask them to do something. Mm-hmm. But because we're doing it with the biggest brands on the planet, right, and small, medium brands as well, we're hitting so much of the supply chain. I guarantee you, if a brand came to me today and said, here's my vendor list, here's who I source from, we're probably already talking and recruiting some of those suppliers through other brands. And so our ability to be able to say, we can help you without you feeling like you're going this alone, all the more reason. 2 or 3 years ago, when I would have meetings at with brands at the CFDA, who were oftentimes small designers that had relatively small supply chains, they would say, I wield no power here. I can't do anything. And it was harder then because I understood where they were coming from. Today, I would say, nope, we're doing this all together. You're an input, and you're going to benefit by being part of the collective.
Right. No excuses, as Julia.
No excuses.
No excuses. We're literally flipping the pyramid. You take 1,000 small brands or 2,000 small brands, it can make a big change very quickly.
Absolutely.
And the thing I want to just jump in there, if I could, is the timing, right? And the timing just couldn't be better from the standpoint of the silver lining from the pandemic, right? Because there's such an existential quality to this, and I raise it because it feels outside in. And while I love fashion and I've learned so much and I've been very close to it this last 15 months and love it and see so many parallels, I think you're hearing from my comments that there are parallels and that it's sort of not as sector or industry specific as it seems from the inside, right? From the outside, there is sameness and actually addressing the entire supply chain from a fashion standpoint won't happen unless other industries move in parallel. And I think, and we don't need to go into that, but I do feel like, we talk about the pandemic so much, and obviously there's been so much pain attached to it, but it is really relevant to this conversation because of the triggers, right? And it's not just the existential triggers, but the catalytic ones, right? These things that Louis, you've been talking about, and you've been doing this, as you say, for 15 years. It's been a process to get to this point, right? And
100%.
then something like the pandemic sweeps through as this catalyst to say, nothing's the same ever again. And do you feel like that was sort of brought a real impetus of a different kind?
Well, I certainly do. I think it's the fresh eyes we all needed,
Yes.
across all aspects of our lives and the work that we're doing, because that values shift means you get to look at everything differently, and how great to be able to change our paradigms or our perspectives. And one thing that I will say about that is you're absolutely right about other industries, because let me tell you, back to the individual versus the collective, when we're going in and looking at how to scale to 100% renewable energy in production of apparel, we can't do that at a facility by facility basis. It does not make sense to do this as an on-site individual. This is oftentimes industrial park level. This is regional level with power purchase agreements and solar arrays. That means you need more than just textile manufacturers and other fashion accessory producers. And oftentimes those corporate campuses of industrial parks have a lot of different industries there, from durables and hard goods and electronics and fashion and textile. So you're absolutely right. We were not going to solve for this if we just think of it as one sector, because we're already having those broader conversations of clean water, wastewater treatment, as a regional approach. It's a watershed specific approach that involves every input to the industrial machine in that region, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add one other thing to that, just because it's so new and I think really relevant, which is I think we all know that ultimately it's going to take something beyond any individual industry for us all to get there. And it's where policy comes in, and it's where governments come in, and there is something that is absolutely required in terms of unlocking the ability of policy to change the way things get done, is rooted in the readiness to make that true. It is too risky for politicians to be pursuing policies, right? They sense it, in that election cycle. You can say certain things, right? But if you want to confront some of the hard asks and the hard questions, right? You do that. You feel more comfortable doing that when you know there's an actual level of readiness there. And I think what Louis, you're describing is a level of readiness that is evolving, and I'm watching that. So based on your amazing work and some of the other amazing work that's going on in the sector, California now wants to understand what is required in order to provide organic farming for the entire state, right? You've got the state now paying attention in a way that It will come on to SustainChain. It will start engaging, not in just dialogue, but actually be fed, be informed, and be guided by some of the breakthroughs that are now going on because of the activity that you're describing.
Yeah, thank you. I 100% everything you said. I'm in agreement.
I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm talking too much.
Not at all.
We're nearing the end of our time, remarkably, but I guess, you know, the net of all of this is that the idea of technology as a solution, correct me if I'm wrong, but really creates this centralized place where all of these sort of like boiling point challenges, solutions, issues are really surfaced,
Yep.
and creates a really sort of much easier to navigate compared to sort of the olden days. Way of figuring out what is the roadmap there, what's the quickest way to get there, because that's what we're all focused on, right? Is the idea of scaling quickly, because we only have, you know, the next 9 to 10 years, but providing all of that necessary knowledge and blueprint to get there in a way that's really accessible to all of the very diverse group of brands and organizations and NGOs, et cetera, et cetera.
But at the same time, just in closing, I want to say that every single person that is listening to our you know, discussion today, they hold the power. You know, every single dollar that you spend on any piece of clothing or food or electronics and so on is a vote towards sustainability and the values that you believe in. So, you know, this is where it starts. And I often think about that sort of signature that was going around for the last 5 or 6 years. Think before you print. You know, and everyone stopped printing all their emails and so on. We have to really think before we purchase, because it's such a strong voice and puts the pressure on these brands to do the right thing. We can control this.
And I will also say this audience at FIT is the next generation too. And I think it's critical that wherever you are, whether you're faculty, whether you're administration, whether you're a student, you know, whether you're a graduate student, you're part of the building of the educating and the resourcing of what comes next. And for that reason, you know, a little plug on the side, we're working on a docuseries on the next generation of solutions for the industry. We should probably be doing a private screening, both with FIT and SustainChain for this, but it's really around, you know, identifying the solutions coming out of the next generation. It's called Generation F. And we have a website, genfseries.com. But I think, to me, really engaging this community that's rising into who will be the designers, who will be making sourcing decisions, who will be leveraging family office grant making, and you know, all of this is government policy decision. This is all coming out of
Innovators and on
innovators, scientists, you know, bioscience. It's like this is it, and we really want to double down on the resources to get this work happening faster.
So before we close, we're a group that's very much driven and focused on actions and outcomes, and creating real results. And so I wanted you, Jackie and Louis, Julia's already sort of provided us with her insight as to what we need to do, but what would you say is your call to action? What do people need to walk away from this conversation, you know, doing? To create that impact, whether it's individually or through their company. Jackie, do you want to try that?
I'm mute.
I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'll just say, and we're about to do it ourselves, stop talking. Just get clear on what you're trying to accomplish. Know that there are others out there that are not just ready, but doing it too. And if SustainChain can be as helpful to you as Louis sounds like it's helpful to him, we are here and we're ready to help facilitate and help drive that change. The recommendation I have is before you decide you're going to do something your way, think about, not too long, don't overthink it. Think about the fact that others are doing the same things in perhaps the same way, or other ways that are going to be counterproductive to the way you're doing it. Don't be paralyzed by that. Know that there's technology that empowers you to make the leap, right, beyond those, you know, those considerations and those limitations. It's not an ad for SustainChain, but it sort of is.
Louis, you have the final word.
Well, I think my call to action is to find that part of you that is passionate about this work, and to lean in on it, and as Jackie said, to really double down on the action. Robert Frost says, "Yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to join my vocation and my avocation. My two eyes make one in sight." So my success has been by leaning into what brings me alive and pulling that into my career and into my job, so that I wake up every day feeling purpose driven. Become a fashion activist if that's what calls you. Become an SDG activist if that's what calls you. And you can do it in small ways, medium ways, large ways, but just find that part that brings you alive and lean in.
Wonderful.
Wonderful way to end.
Thank you, everybody. That was a great hour. I can't believe it moved as quickly as it did. So thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, with that, we'll
Thanks,
say
Liz. Thanks, Jules. And thank you, Liz.